and stepping into the breach at very, very last minute indeed. I'm very grateful to our own Director of Studies, Angelos Papadopoulos, known to many of you, a prehistorian, an archaeologist who principally works on the interconnections between the Aegean, Cyprus, his adoptive home, and the Levant. He's worked and published on iconography, particularly of war, and he's going to open our colloquium today with preparing for war, sports and status in the Bronze Age Aegean pictorial arts. Agile.
Right. Thank you, Robert. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. It's a very warm day, and I'm glad you could make it. So, yes, it is pretty much the last minute, so I hope you'll enjoy my thoughts. It's mostly a concentration of ideas and the problems, in fact, more problems than ideas, about reading, interpreting images from the Bronze Age, speechless, if you like, narratives, and of course, to such a specialist audience, the more you have to say about these things, especially if you disagree, please come and find me and let's talk about them, because obviously the lack of text is a big issue in our field. So let me start by saying that, as Robert said, indeed, I've been working on warfare, interconnections, trade, but not sports. However, by studying images from the Bronze Age on all media for more than 2 decades, I came across a few images of athletics, physical activity, games, and so on. So, of course, the question is, what is sport, what is athletics, and if you can find it in the Bronze Age. So I started the easy way by going online and check the Cambridge Dictionary, and more or less this is what sport is all about. A game, competition, or activity needing physical effort and skill that is played or done according to rules for enjoyment and or as a job. The second one, physical activity that keeps people healthy, probably is out of question, at least for the Bronze Age, is completely invisible. So I thought, okay, if this is the main base, the first step we're going to start with, then obviously, and I hope this works, just want to say that for the Bronze Age, 3rd millennium, 2nd millennium BC, if anybody's expecting stadia, like at Messini, or Altires, or Panathinaikon, you're wrong, there's nothing like it. To the extent, there's literally little evidence to non-existent regarding what was happening back then in relation to these kind of activities. So, although I would really like to go and find similar objects, there is none, or at least they're invisible to us. So the idea is that maybe the next step would be to deconstruct somehow the definition and select some keywords like competition, activity with physical effort, rules, and for enjoyment, probably not really, but more of a job or a duty or what happens. You'll see in a few minutes. So the idea is that maybe through imagery, we can find fertile ground for these words, but maybe not. So let's see what happens. If we focus on physical activity, because this is something that can easily be distinguishable in the iconography, then as you will see, a selection of images shows a certain direction towards violence, which is a big thing back in the Bronze Age. And obviously, reading the program, the next paper by Thomas Cano will be about similar topic. So I'm guessing there will be a nice prelude to the next one. So if violence is connected to this physical activity, it's kind of expected or accepted, if you like, globally speaking, that hunting and warfare and those two activities are interconnected, at least for the prehistoric times. Definitely, we can see some connections. And this is my aim for today, to show you how possible athletic, or if you like, physical activities that can be reminiscent of sports of the following periods, using the example later, can be connected primarily to physical violence and this kind of activity that is connected to arts and status. The material we'll be using is obviously coming from a large variety of the Aegean, of prehistoric Greece, many sites, many places. We will conclude with the context, because the context will allow us to read these images even more clearly. But we have, of course, ivory surfaces, portable objects like rings or pottery, wall paintings, clay larnaces, although only a few of them, and basically stone vases, faience, and so on. So images on a variety of media will be our focus. The problem is, needless to say, the problems are, needless to say, fragmentation. Many of them are broken. We're missing the rest of this lovely stone vessel from Knossos. Many of them are erroneously read because we've been using publications with old drawings or even worse photographs. Conservation and preservation is an issue. And of course, many occasions, we only have a tiny percentage of what was originally there, especially wall paintings. So many methodological limitations, but again, we can identify some images connected to these themes, and maybe you can deduct some conclusions. After all, iconography, following Livia Morgan's, if you like, keynote for some years ago, is as expressive, as informative as any language. But of course, you have to understand this language, understand these meanings. If I can have a moment to talk about the technique, if you like, that can be used, which is deconstruction, I'd like to take you to a kind of extreme deconstruction through visual techniques and digital photography. So this is an example of what I am doing for the past few years, how we deconstruct images, how to construct the elements of the images, and basically what happens. So for those of you not familiar, this is a conical silver vase. Apologies for the bad lighting. It was on purpose like that, for the sake. From my scene, the Saturdays has a scene of fighting in it, and basically on it. And basically the idea was to take it to the laboratory, take a few thousands, if you like, of photos. There is my associate, my colleague, Nikos Papadopoulos, taking photos of the actual object. And then through keeping notes, getting ideas, seeing the different pieces, because let me go back, this silver vessel here was glued together, put together by a number of silver fragments. We don't have the whole thing, back in 1890s and then 2014. Anyway, long story short, after making our own studies, we digitally broke this piece. You can see a person over there. You can see some architectural features over there. That's about 1 centimeter. So you can see how small these things are. We cannot break down these objects. And literally, we scan them, we work on them, we make drawings of them. These are 2 pieces of green, tree, plants, who knows what. And then by putting them all together, each individual piece, each individual figure is being worked together. And the result is to reconstruct, for example, to suggest a reconstruction for this battle scene, fortified city, people fighting, the sea, and other elements. Long story short, by deconstructing digitally prehistoric iconography, we can perhaps understand its meaning by taking down to the minimum element. So similarly, you can identify helmets, you can identify boxing gloves, you can identify all kinds of things, and then you can make connections. That's our methodology so far. People have been trying to identify sporting activities and spectacle, if you like, in the Bronze Age from a long time. For example, this is the gold handle of one of the earliest swords in the Aegean, coming from Crete. And people really want to see, scholars really want to see over the years that this is in fact an acrobat during a specific festival or who knows what, a religious activity, with similar examples, parallels, iconographic parallels from Egypt. But of course, we cannot go anywhere beyond that. Others really want to see images that we see in the future. For example, this is, of course, a black figure vase depicting chariot races, and we really would like to see them in the Bronze Age. But the one and only, I repeat, one and only, over 2 millennia of art, the one and only, to my knowledge at least, running horse on pottery attached to a chariot is from Tiryns. And indeed, if this person here is holding a kylix drinking wine, so this perhaps is indeed a chariot race, so he's enjoying the view, but maybe not. But again, what can you say from one single case, which could be anything and very, very fragmentary? But of course, the other horse, which is also in the stance of flying gallop, as we say, perhaps it is indeed a chariot race, but it could be a chariot battle. Then how do you explain the sitting figure? Anyway, long story short, we are trying to read, to interpret these very unique examples by using later period parallels. But to be honest, this is the most we can get. However, there are other cases. If this person is a runner, this is the runner's ring, has been called, but most likely connected to some religious activities, especially if you consider these, the iconography of these ladies as of either Potnia or priestesses or goddesses or whatever. Anyway, again, it's very difficult to identify athletes, people performing sports back in those days, because we don't have clear images like everybody else in the historical periods. However, two cases seem to be clearly related to physical activity, to competition, but most likely not for sports in the modern sense. And one of them is, of course, bull leaping. Primarily in Crete, in a variety of media, especially at Knossos, but not only there. Ivory, bull leapers, what's left is there. Famous fresco scenes, heavily restored, but quite clearly this is the case. Bull leaping has been considered to be one of the very few sports in Bronze Age Crete. Again, if sports for enjoyment, I can hardly see the enjoyment in this activity. Wherever you read this as a real case of jumping or not, it is a difficult and dangerous situation. Artistically, we've tried to read again these images, and you can see some popular art or even older archaeological publications trying to reconstruct, for example, bull leaping activities in the arena, in the court of Knossos, for example, the central court. And of course, we can read, we can drive the reader of this image to consider this as a sport, in terms of you have young athletes in a large space trying to jump over or next to a bull, something that is still performed by some people, not the matadors, although nowadays we're very concerned about actually damaging, hurting the animal. There are theories, there are views that in the past people would actually sacrifice the bull, leading to a violent end. And to be honest, this goes more towards ceremonies, religion, rather than sport for enjoyment. But anyway, bull leaping has been a major fact. And however, I want to connect this with something else. Because if you stick with the bull, if you like, motif, the bull animal, I'm sorry I couldn't find in the short amount of time I had a drawing, but basically you can see an ivory pyxis, and this is the whole thing, nicely photographed. You can see a charging bull, a person grasping the horns. I have no idea if this can actually happen in reality. While two hunters, supposedly, are running away with the spears. Most likely this was an attempt to catch the bull, something went wrong, but then how do you explain this person jumping over? So is this hunting / leaping? What I'm saying is there's an abundance of bull images in Bronze Age Crete. Many of them are connected to people, some of them head over heels. Sometimes, like here, we can read it as a hunting scene, question mark. But long story short, apart from bull leaping, bull hunting is seems to be another theme. And this is so successful that you can see it later on in the mainland. For example, the Vafio cups, the famous two gold cups from the Tholos tomb of Vafio, most likely of Minoan patronship, but definitely in the mainland, in the following century. So if you like graphic novels and comic strips, this is for you. Literally what in Anglo-Saxon bibliography we call the loud cup and the quiet cup is exactly the scene of capturing a bull. So on the top one, it's a very failed mission. You can see in 3 episodes, the bull running, then the hunters throw the net on the bull, and the result is the bull goes mental and of course attacks and kills or injures the hunter. That's not the way to catch a bull. This is the loud cup, I'm guessing because it's very loud in emotions. The quiet cup, it is exactly how you need to catch a bull. The same bull perhaps, eating in the area, relaxing. They bring a cow next to him, he's distracted. And then a young guy with a Minoan zoma just grabs with a rope his back leg. That is, the bull is captured. Easy, the quiet cup. But the thing is, whether you have a loud cup or a quiet cup, or you have people charging against, and bulls not charging against you, hunting bulls seems to be a major motif. And again, people really want to go, scholars really want to go towards seeing this as sports. Probably not, but the fact is that hunting is more than a simple activity for pleasure, according to what you're going to see in the next few slides. The second category is maybe far more obvious, although unique in many cases and very rare outside Crete. Very few examples, but they exist. From the Cyclades, the one and only example we have coming from a private house, question mark. At Acroterion Thera, you have, of course, the young boys boxing, but of course, they're wearing jewelry, they're sharing one pair of gloves, their partially shaved hair with hair locks most likely goes to initiation rites, to rites of passage, than boxing for fun or anything else. But of course, again, these are speechless pieces of evidence, so who knows? However, if we go to further down to New Pallas Crete from the 1700 to 1450, we do have miniature wall paintings of what seems to be boxers, seal impressions, and of course, the all-time classic popular stone vases, reliefs, depicting boxing and wrestling. Again, not great quantities and fragmentary, but boxing seems to be as popular as bull leaping in those areas. A tradition that seems to survive, again, bear in mind, we only have a few examples, not many of them, a couple of maybe under 10 examples for the whole of the Mycenaean Phylact period. Many of them found outside the Aegean, primarily in Cyprus, suggesting that perhaps there's a clientele there who likes boxing activities. But the fact is, and if you really if you're really going to deconstruct deeply the image, maybe these are indeed muscles. And this guy is wearing a neck protector. All these things have been published in red. Fists over there, and so on. So seemingly these pairs of boxing, are quite popular in the not popular, are evident. They are present even after the end of the so-called palaces of Crete. The fact is, again, that's more close to our modern idea of a sport, but is it enough? Maybe the answer, and this is where I'm fine, I'll try to make sense of my own ideas, is the famous boxer ritone. I'm sure most of you know about this already, so I'll not go in details. Found in a Triada, made of steatite, quite hard to make, but not the one and only, of course. And this so-called boxer ritone, this vase, has 4 registers with basically what you saw before, all in one. Wrestling, boxing, bull leaping, in the 4 registers. Some people are wearing helmets. Some people are wearing helmets with plumes, and has been argued that exactly this element shows the military character of this activity. Again, if you're going to deconstruct the images, maybe these columns suggest it takes place inside a space, indoors. One of the courts of the so-called palaces of Crete, who knows? Maybe it's not our scope to go to this analysis, but the fact is, people with greaves, people with helmets, different kinds of helmets, they seem to appear together in this kind of activities. For whoever made this ritone, which is a very, let me go back, a very religious vessel, you use it for libations. There's a hole here, and of course you pour whatever you put inside, you let it flow, and you have a libation. So this is a religious object with this very popular scene. And to be honest, it's hard to avoid the thought that this is more religious than anything else, than sport. Of course, people have gone beyond that, and they try to reconstruct the whole series of the mini frieze of the register, and they see not really boxing pairs, but they see, according to Sahlud from 1987, this is basically like a commando raid. People are attacking other people, and it's not really a boxing game or practice per se, but something much more violent. That's why they need the helmets. And the idea of preparing for war, preparing for physical activity has been more than popular. Don't forget that there's other iconography. I can talk for ages, but I will stop, of course, connecting young people, young male adults from teenagehood to adulthood, again, bibliography is immense. For example, again, from Steatite, again, from Aegean Triada, the chieftain cup from the same period, 1700 to 1450. We do have a young person. That's not a plume, by the way. This must be like either a whip or maybe the sheath of the sword. But the point is, again, you have some weapons connected to young people, and it's difficult to ignore that. Having discussed the idea of the helmet, having discussed the idea of hunting, and especially bulls, the same elements can be found elsewhere. Helmets, although usually worn by warriors in the Bronze Age, they can definitely be seen hunting. A few examples, but good ones. So this is, apologies for the weird ankle. This is a seal stone, a drawing of a wild boar being attacked by a single person with his hound, with a collar. And basically the helmet, again, is not indicative of warriors. It's not indicative of hunters only. Could be indicative of boxers. Okay, not in this case, obviously, but definitely all these elements come together to the idea of violence. And because literally, I personally cannot find any connection to sporting activities in the modern sense, it fits nicely with the idea that all these elements go towards violence, war, and hunting, which for many scholars, hunting shows prowess against animals. Warfare is prowess against humans. Sometimes they overlap. Later on, wall paintings and other media are very popular in mainland Greece. We stopped having gold rings with images of warriors. Now have wall paintings. Boxing remains only on portable vases, which is quite weird because you have all these huge spaces that you can cover with boxing scenes. We think we might have some boxing scenes in the previous new palace Crete. In the palaces, we have some reliefs, life-size arms, suggesting perhaps boxers, but it's very fragmentary to say more about this. But seemingly, even in the later Mycenaean period, in 14th and 13th centuries, we don't have any boxers depicted, but only on vases. But we do have some wall paintings with battles, again, the same helmets, the same double spears, so on, so on. Coming to an end slowly and to a conclusion, by putting together the fragments, we can reconstruct narratives. One of them comes from Tiryns, from the palace of Tiryns, 13th century BCE, and going around the so-called throne room in the Megaron of Mycenae, which most likely was a throne room. And we have females based on the white skin, on board the chariot, very relaxed. The chariot walks, the horse walks, is not running. We are missing some parts, but most likely these grooms with greaves, notice that please, without any helmets, but with hounds, they're leading those chariots, most likely. And the next part of the scene would be the same hounds would be taking the wild boar to a trap, leading the wild boar to a trap. And you can barely see the hands, the red-colored hands of one of the grooms killing this wild boar. And obviously, by putting all the iconography of hunting together, wild boars have been very popular as praise for humans, to the extent it has been suggested that is most likely connected as an activity to the very later Victorian England fox hunting. By the way, all that for a single fox. I don't know the point of it, but I'm guessing there was a whole ceremony. There's a whole background leading to these aristocrats on their horses with so many hounds to go for hunt. And people really want to see a similarity, at least in the mentality and so on and so on. So coming to an end, let me just say that we do have images of boxers, not many of them, from a variety of contexts. Some of them come from private houses, like from the West House, the battle scene from Akrotiri, or from another complex, the Boxing Boys. We do have tombs with images of fighting, of hunting, of killing each other. And obviously the owners of these portable objects must have been people of some status. You don't literally bury all these goods unless the person buried was indeed of some prestige. And of course, Some other images of warfare come from palaces, specific rooms, limited accessibility, and not everybody could go to, for example, Hall 64 in Pylos and see this frieze. By the way, this is fully restored, but quite close to reality, we believe. This warfare frieze, this battle frieze from Pylos. In short, scholarship has shown that, suggested at least, that for the Bronze Age, hunting and fighting are very close to each other. Sometimes, although the problem is, do we have real depictions of life, actual depictions of these activities, or a bit symbolic, or a bit exaggerated? But the fact is, hunting bulls, hunting boars promotes you as a hunter, promotes you as a warrior. The same attire, helmets, shields in some cases. We even have hunting with shields, but I don't want to bore you with all these images. But the fact is, regarding weapons and weaponry, people do really use the same for hunting and fighting. And seemingly, by constructing the iconography, we can see some connections between boxing and hunting bulls. And again, for example, from Egyptian data, which is far more complete than ours, we seem to have so many suggestions that physical contest prepares people for war. So although there is lack of text, notoriously lack of text in the late Bronze Age of the Aegean, I hope I gave you some appetite, some taste of my thoughts about how we don't really have sports in the modern sense. We have violent scenes. The violent scenes are connected to physical activity needed to prepare you for the very tenuous, if you like, life of a hunter and or a warrior. And most likely, based on the helmets, based on the specific media selected, boxing and wrestling, they did exist. Some people also think for the bull hunting as well, the bull leaping. So these three activities, not sports per se, but preparations for young males to go to war, or if you like, to prepare them for what comes next. I cannot say much about if they had an agogi or if they had something else for the young adults to go, for the male adults to prepare for war for a couple of years, who knows? But the iconography, although limited, points to this direction. I hope this made sense. Thank you so much.
Can I open the floor to questions for Angelos?
Yes.
Angelos, thank you very much for that really good overview. Thank you for the great overview. I had a question about bull leaping,
Please.
which is there are a lot of attestations of bull leaping in the Near East prior to Cretan, predating Cretan. Similar sorts of feats. Do you have any ideas about connections? Because if they're initiation rites, if they are initiation rites in Crete, is it, I mean, it's been my impression that in the Near East, they're kind of spectacular displays for emperors, rulers, and so on. But is it sort of a transition in Crete? Is it something different, or is it, again, more spectacular displays in the palace to impress people?
Especially the last part of the sentence, in the palace to impress people, is what bothers me the most. I cannot really say this. To add to the confusion, there was also an 18th century Hittite vessel showing exactly at its frieze a bull leaping scene. I forget the name of the area, but definitely this is not just a Near Eastern thing. Definitely it is before the Cretans. Depends your school of thought. If you go that this is an actual event, it has happened. And by the way, until 5 years ago, I thought this is just symbolic, but obviously there are videos of people jumping over bulls. Now, whether they were on drugs like in the Hellenistic period, the bulls, not the people. So they would jump with a slower bull or not, I cannot say. Okay, artistically, I don't really want to go if this was a reality or not. I have my serious doubts, but artistically, definitely it's an import. Definitely we have connections with Egypt from the 3rd millennium BC, so why not? My question is, if the image itself, if the motif of the charging bull is an import, does the symbolism, the practice, the realities of this event that may have happened, actually, that had happened quite clearly in the Near East, if this came with the image? So I'm not very sure myself if the Cretans adopted it as a very powerful message. I mean, to give you an example, it is so popular in the arts that Diamantis Panagiotopoulos, I believe, from Heidelberg, suggests that the gold rings from Knossos with the bull leaping scene are the insignia of the bureaucrats of Knossos, which goes beyond the idea of athlete and sport. So anyway, I think they did come from the Near East, but I have serious doubts if they were ever practiced. No, so I don't know if the practice came from the Near East or simply the art. But I cannot go beyond that anywhere further. Sorry, it was a long answer, sorry.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you for this overview. You were mentioning the bull leaping scenes, and I think that you placed that also in the central courtyard of Knossos. And I have looked at that and thought about it. How do we know that it actually took place in the central courtyard? Because if you look at the plan of the palace, there's a lot of very narrow corridors with vases and amphora and everything else. And how on earth do you get bulls there? And the second thing is the central courtyard was paved, which seems rather uncomfortable for even for skilled bull leaper. Do we know anything, or is this just an assumption going back, for instance, to Arthur Evans or anybody else?
If you ask me, we do not know it. I personally have seen even a lovely documentary called Atlantis for some reason, where several scholars, including Colin MacDonald, the former curator of Knossos, and Clary Palivou, had, for example, allowed as advisors to show an arena in the central part, in the central court of Knossos, maybe with the help of some portable wooden benches for people to sit around, whatever this means for the dangers, the whole thing. No, I don't think it's possible to hold anything like this in such a closed space. Spectators have nowhere to go unless you go for all the other ideas that were on top of the roofs. We only have the grand staircase as a place where people can sit. Same thing with Malia, same thing with Festos. So personally, I find it very difficult to believe, A, the whole thing ever happened. I'm very skeptical about, personally, I think that this was only a symbolic image, nothing else. But again, I may be horribly wrong. Now, regarding space, this is the big problem. People have argued that it's much easier to make an arena, a space outside any complex. And no, the court, although very popular, especially with the columns in the Boxer-Riton, I found it very hard to believe so. So I cannot say where it took place, if it took place, but inside the courts, no. The pavement, as you said, is the right one. If you go to Malia, you will see the altar in the center, not facilitating anything. So for the spectators and the actual bull and the athletes, no. Inside the courts, no. But that's very subjective.
I'll add my thanks for your really interesting overview and thought-provoking lecture right now. Now, I'm not to add to the confusion about bull leaping and things like that, but I've taught this course and I've taken students for many years to Heraklion and also shown them a slide of that reconstructed bull leaping scene, and there are very many things really wrong with it. Some perhaps to do with the restoration, but one very important thing which has got to do with interpretation, because the figure who is supposedly standing with the bull about to go through the bull's horns actually is holding the bull's horns from the side, because both of those horns are visible on the what would be that person's right side. So that person is steadying the bull. And I have often wondered whether, building on your thought that it might be the artistic imagery might be imported from the East, probably from the Hittites, whether it's an interpretation or a misunderstanding of what was going on in the Hittite rituals, which were bull acrobatics. There was a stationary bull and people danced and leapt over the back of a stationary bull to music. And I've often thought that person's position might actually be a sign that this is what is actually going on, and that the image took on a life of itself. As to its reality, and the problem with paving the courtyard. That's a very good point, but we must remember that it's quite clear in the signet rings that the runners that we have are clearly running on paving. And I would say they're probably on those paved strips that we see on the outside, especially in the old palace at Festos. Those, what I would think of as ritual strips where a ritual of running or something like that goes on. So these are just my suggestions. Your talk made me think of, again, things I haven't thought of for a long time, but thank you very much. And I'll pass on to the next person.
Thank you. If I say one final note, there's not something else. I was very surprised over the years, and this is through experiment and mistakes, that those people making signet rings, wall paintings, I mean, the Bronze Age craftspeople, right? They were also making mistakes. They were also misunderstood several of the motifs. As you said rightly, it does not mean if you adopt a theme, a motif, you understand it. So there are many problems. And nowadays, there are studies on the famous blue monkeys from Akrotiri, thinking that they're entirely wrong in terms of what you see. I'm not even going to the modern interpretation, the modern restorations, but seemingly even the prehistoric artist would be making mistakes or not able to understand what this person was depicting. So having said that, and especially about perspective, I like very much the idea that these were on the side of the bull than in front of the bull, which makes much more sense. But anyway, just want to raise the issue that in all arts, all craftspeople were also making mistakes, and we should not take every single image as the perfect example. So let's read the image. I think we also need to consider, yeah, especially for the wall paintings, tremendous mistakes. In one famous case, we have two right hands on the same person. I'm just saying.
Great. Thank you very much, Angelos.
Thank you.